Chapter 24. What happens in this chapter? Well, the group prepare to chase Dracula across Europe. Mina obviously appears to be changing in light of her experience with the Count. They draw up detailed plans, and of course Mina and Jonathan are aware that the relationship that they share certainly has changed. So, chapter 24 starts with Dr. Seward's phonograph diary, yet it is spoken by Van Helsing. This is the first time that Van Helsing has a voice that is not reported via another narrator. Van Helsing obviously demonstrates that he's able and very desirous of embracing modern technology. And what does he do? He uses Seward's phonograph to record a message for Jonathan. He thinks Jonathan should stay in England with Mina because they know that Dracula is returning to Transylvania. And in fact, that he says he, our enemy, have gone away. He have gone back to his castle in Transylvania. And just to, again, it reinforces the fact that Van Helsing is Dutch. Please remember that English is not his first language, hence why the concord may not necessarily be accurate. We've got a singular he with a plural verb. And Van Helsing goes on to describe the nature of the battle that they've begun. We then have Jonathan Harker's journal. Please note all of this is taking place over the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th of October. And time, again, has been very elastic because over the text, chapters have referred maybe to single events or to events over a certain amount of time, whereas now this grouping of chapters is all about the same, a very short period of time, because so much is going on. This is the heightened action towards the end stages of the novel. So Jonathan says in his journal on the 4th of October that he's very, very happy that says how happy Mina is that, of course, Dracula is returning to Transylvania. We are also reminded in this chapter of the significance and the importance of the link between the supernatural and dreaming, and the theme of the supernatural and dreaming. When Jonathan obviously looks at the red mark or the red scar on Mina's forehead, which is of course a reminder that Dracula has infected her and that she is in fact now regarded as unclean, he is reminded of the reality that this vampire does exist. So even in his moments when he thinks that perhaps this hasn't really happened, he just looks across at his wife and sees the red scar on her forehead and is reminded. And of course, the scar on her face makes Jonathan question their ability to win. Can they win, especially when his wife is so closely linked? We have Mina's journal on the 5th of October, and in her journal, obviously she records the various reports concerning Dracula's departure. In their investigation, they've discovered that Dracula has boarded a ship. He's headed for Varna, which is a seaport in modern-day Bulgaria. It's near the mouth of the Danube River, and it's the same place where he left from 3 months earlier. So it's very interesting how what's happened over the way that time has stretched over these 3 months. There's only one ship headed on the Black Sea. And of course, as soon as we know that it's going from the Black Sea to the Danube, and as soon as it is enveloped in a mist, we are very well aware that this is the ship on which Dracula is traveling, because of course he is very fond of mist, and this is again an example of pathetic fallacy. Please remember as well that mist is a symbol of intrigue and mystery, and the idea of lack of understanding and lack of knowledge, and perhaps even exploring the idea of how we don't always understand things going on around us, especially in terms of different cultures and different peoples coming into a land. So Van Helsing says, I've told him how the measure of leaving his own barren land, barren of peoples, and coming to a new land where life with man teems, till they are like the multitude of standing corn. This gives us insight into why Van Helsing believes Dracula left Transylvania and headed towards England. Maybe because Transylvania had become so barren of people, either through a number of things, either through obviously his destruction of the people, but also because of movement and relocation. Perhaps Transylvania did not have enough of an economy to support people within its lands. People have moved out to go elsewhere to find wealth. But what it does highlight is that Dracula's had to move on. He's had to find a place full of life, which is obviously rich and flourishing. And he does this when he finds England. But it's interesting that to his native soil, he's returning to escape. And again, we escape back to what we know. Van Helsing obviously attributes Dracula's success to his origin and his abilities, and obviously it's because of his origin and his family background and his aristocratic standing that he has been so successful in England. And of course, he tells the others that Dracula is an exceptional vampire. With this one, all the forces of nature that are occult and deep and strong must have worked together in some wondrous way. So he accurately describes Dracula's powers and his abilities, and says he appreciates his wisdom. So clearly, where Van Helsing holds more sway than Dracula does and is able to win is because he respects and his nemesis, the power of his nemesis, and doesn't underestimate him. Whereas I think what Stoker's trying to say is that Dracula does underestimate the humans and therefore does fall short. To say that in a hard and warlike time, he will celebrate that he have more iron nerve, more subtle brain, more braver heart than any man. So this is the first time, obviously, we're given the impression that before becoming this evil vampire who wants to take over the world, that Dracula was a great man. And of course, Stoker is here trying to create this tragic figure that with a fall from grace, a great man whose fall, which is his need to be in control, his need to own, has caused his downfall. And again, much like Lucifer, God's favorite angel who fell and became devil, Dracula has fallen. It's interesting that Van Helsing admires Dracula's iron nerve and subtle brain and his brave heart. And if you turn over a few pages, it says he realizes how dangerous he is, because he says, for in this enlightened age, when men believe not even what they see, the doubt of wise men would be his greatest strength. There we go. So what he says to his men, what he says to the group of them, that they should never underestimate his intelligence. Just in case you were wondering, reference to Old Knights of the Cross, of course, is referring to the leaders of the crusade. Remember, the crusade was Christians fighting against Muslims, so of course that fight is certainly not a new one. Again, it's the idea that exploring the idea of how man uses religion as an excuse to fight wars. So Van Helsing goes on to describe Dracula, his origins, and how, of course, he is a threat to mankind. And again, let me reiterate, it is the fact that Van Helsing does not underestimate Dracula's great mind that gives them the advantage over him. We then swap to Seward's diary. We're still on the 5th of October, and he reluctantly discusses with Van Helsing the extent to which they should trust Mina. Seward's concerned. Obviously, Madame Mina is changing, as Van Helsing concurs, and they're worried as to what she will impart to Dracula. Interestingly, the characters of a vampire characteristics are coming in her face. She's got sharper teeth, and they're worried that he will compel her mind. So they fear that he's going to use, Dracula's going to use his connection, and she will therefore tell him exactly what they are planning to do, because of course her physical appearance is changing, and they decide, ignorant of our intent, so she cannot tell what she does not know. So they, despite that promise that were made in the previous chapter, that or the 2 chapters ago, they were not going to keep anything from one another, they decide that they are in fact going to have to keep Mina in the dark in order to preserve themselves and to keep themselves safe. Mina, of course, realizes the predicament these gentlemen are in, and she decides to take herself away from strategic planning meetings. So she sent a message by her husband to say she would not join us at present, as she thought it better that we should be free to discuss our movements without her presence to embarrass us. So it's the idea that even Mina realizes that Dracula can use her, and that if she doesn't know what they're up to, she can't give him any help. So she, in her way, chooses to absent herself from the meetings. Just a couple of interesting things. The boat on which Dracula is traveling is called the Tsarina Catherine. It's alluding to Catherine the Great of Russia, who was in charge from 1729 to 96. Or she was reputed to be a very promiscuous, yet very powerful and despotic ruler. And again, the fact that Dracula is on board a ship in this with this name is interesting, because of course he seems to be the same. So the men are preparing for a mission. Of course, Quincy has gathered together weapons for them so that they can protect themselves, and he even suggests that they add Winchesters to their armaments. Again, just a little bit of background. The Winchester is the gun that is regarded to have been the gun that won the West, because it has a lever action breech mechanism, and of course this allows the person shooting to get off a number of shots before having to reload, unlike traditional rifles which require reloading after every shot. We go on to Jonathan Harker's journal, and Mina makes her husband promise that he will not tell her how they plan to track down Dracula. And of course, as soon as he makes the promise, it's like a barrier has been erected between them. So their relationship is suffering as a result of this, purely because their communication, there has to be a breakdown in their communication. And this is causing strain. Of course, Mina insists on being part of the hunt. She says it'll be safer for them if she's with them, because of course then they know where she is and what she's doing. And of course she argues quite rightly that Dracula would force her to follow them anyway, so Van Helsing agrees and says, yes, do come with us. Also, clearly she points out that again, they can monitor the way what Dracula is up to by hypnotizing her. So again, Mina is showing herself to be very important, showing her rational thought, and again, reminding us of her significance. Again, just they all write their wills before setting off, which of course is essential in case somebody dies, and we do know that it is inevitable. We will have some death. And of course, we end with Mina calling to Jonathan, and the chapter ends with us and the group ready to set off across Europe. They are really prepared. Look at how Jonathan's journal here is so different to the one when he wrote when he first visited Europe. He is not as excited as he was in chapter 1, and of course he has to hide his worry and his concern of his wife from her, because of course he fears that this will have a negative impact on her. Note how this part of the novel does seem to drag a bit. It was tradition, obviously, for Victorian novel towards the end to be extended Probably because people didn't want them to end, because of course, remember, this was the form of entertainment, and somebody getting up to read this novel, especially if they did it in an extremely dramatic way, the audience would not have wanted to miss out. They would have not wanted for it to go too quickly.